Dr. Jill on The View. I mean, honestly, is there anything greater than that? Well, we've got it for you. Plus, Bill Maher and Fareed Zakaria, and don't be fooled, Bill Maher still hates conservatives. He denies it, but he actually proves it, and we'll show you. Plus, Joe Biden admits Kamala Harris is a DEI hire, and well, he's proud of it, damn it. And why you're at it, get off his lawn. We've got that and a whole lot more. It's time. I know you're here. I know you're excited. I'm Larry O'Connor. You can call me Larry. We are live in Scranton, Pennsylvania still. I just want to explain the courtyard set instead of my own beautiful town hall set. We had a great time last night at the kickoff of the bus tour sponsored by Independent Women's Forum, featuring over a dozen women athletes at the collegiate level and high school level and coaches, including, look at me, that's me with Riley Gaines right there. See that? That was last night at the event. Riley Gaines kicked things off. This is a bus tour that's going all around the country, trying to take back Title IX from the insane lunatic leftists in the Biden administration and maintain that women's sports should be protected for women only and real women. We know what women are. There's Riley on stage at the rally in Scranton. There's me signing the bus. Autograph there. It's a very cool bus. And there's Betsy DeVos, former Secretary of Education. She was there as well. Listen, if you can, look it up, Independent Women's Forum. I think ourbodiesaresports.com is the website for it. If it's coming close to your town, make sure you go out for it. This is an important issue, and it does transcend party lines. And I'm really excited to be a part of it as well. In fact, I'm going to be hosting some of the other bus stops on the tour. So if you want to come out and see me, some of the people in Scranton actually came out to see me last night. And of course, Riley Gaines and the women on stage. But that was kind of a cool touch as well. So we'll see you there. All right. Jill Biden showed up on the set of The View. And I never thought I'd be able to say this, but she sitting at that table actually brought down the collective IQ even further. This was possibly one of the most insipid and phony exercises I've ever seen in American news broadcasting. And I do want to remind you, The View is a news show, not an entertainment show, not a daytime television show. No, it's under the umbrella of the news division at ABC. They should be so proud. Here, take a little sample of Dr. Jill joining the Mensa Club there on the Upper West Side of Manhattan.
Inflation has slowed. Unemployment is down. The stock market is soaring. We finally have movement with infrastructure, climate issues, but some voters are still worried about where America is heading.
Well, we are in a better place now, and what you're saying is true, and we have to get out that message. Every vote counts. This election is important. Joe has done amazing things for this country, and we have to get the message out.
No, just like she rehearsed it in front of the mirror. Does it bother anyone else that she talks like a 14-year-old girl on TikTok? Is this weird? I mean, we know that Joe has a thing about, getting kind of handsy with younger women and smelling their hair. Is this something that she's just trained herself to do with the little girl voice to sort of keep him interested? This is just gross. By the way, the premise of the question that Sonny Hostin started with, the lies begin from the very first utterance. What did she ask?
Now, the country, in my view, is in a great place on so many fronts, right?
Yeah, we're in a great place on so many fronts. I'm sorry, Sonny, if you look at the polls right now, Joe Biden is underwater on the current state of affairs in this country, whether it's national security or immigration or border security or crime or education or the economy or unemployment or inflation and wrong direction numbers, forget about it, if I may quote Robert De Niro. So the premise that things are going great, but there's still some hesitancy out there. What are you talking about? No one in this country thinks they're going great unless they're friends of Joe Biden and they'll be able to grift off of the big spending bills that he's been able to push through and then funnel to his pals, or more importantly, to Hunter's pals. All right, so then Joy Behar really ups the quota here on the brilliant questions.
About his age, that really drives me nuts because I'm the same age as your husband.
Yes!
I got to interrupt this one just for two quick observations. First of all, one that I consistently tried to throw your way, which is no one's worried about Joe Biden's age. It really isn't the age that's the problem. The problem is that he has mashed potato for brains. Now, if Joy Behar actually had some cojones there, which I know she doesn't because, I'm guessing she doesn't, she would actually ask that question, not about his age. No one looks at Joe Biden and say, wow, he seems really old. No, they look at him and say, wow, there's something wrong with his brain functions. He can't put a sentence together or words together. He stumbles everywhere. He doesn't know where he's going on the stage or where he's supposed to exit. In fact, the premise of this question leads me to my second observation. The fact that Joy Behar is a functioning human being with a real job and is able to speak coherently and is the same age as President Biden proves my point. Here's Jill Biden applauding Joy Behar. You're the same age as Joe. Well, good for you. Good for you. What do you mean good for you? She's living proof that there is something seriously wrong with the brain functions of the president of the United States. That's what the question should be. The question should be, Jill, he's my age, but look at me. I'm normal. I can function. If God knows a special prosecutor had evidence that I had committed a crime, he would press charges. He wouldn't say, let's not do it because no jury in the world will convict since he can't even remember the year that his son died. See, no one would treat me that way, even though I'm the same age, Jill. So what the hell is wrong with your husband? What's with the brain damage? That should have been the question. It wasn't the question, though. The question was exactly how the campaign wrote it out for her to ask, because Jill has memorized a certain number of answers. She's practiced them in front of the mirror, and now she's going to deliver one because the question was asked exactly the way Joy Behar was told to ask it.
Because I want people to know this is what 81 is. But what do we have to do to tell people that the man is competent, alert, and doing the job? The other one is doddering and doesn't remember anything and can't put a sentence together and has like brain farts in the middle of a paragraph and they go after Joe.
This election is not about age. Donald Trump's going to be, 78? They're basically the same age. This election is about character. Two choices. You have my husband, Joe, integrity. He's strong. He's steady. He's a leader. He's smart. He's energetic. Or you have chaos.
No, this is just embarrassing. And again, all the nodding around and the affirmations from the people on this panel are disgusting. But she is right. It's not about age. The fact that she's saying Trump and Biden are basically the same age, so it's a wash, actually helps Trump, because when they're side by side, you can see the difference, right? And by the way, again, if I were at the panel, and I'm never allowed to be on a panel like this, I would say, you know what? You're right. It is about character. So what's the deal with his daughter's diary and all that stuff about him showering with her? That's kind of a character issue, isn't it? And also Hunter. He says that he's a great dad, and well, you'll know them from their fruits, right? So let's talk about the fruit of Hunter Biden. He raised Hunter. What's going on with him? You want to make it about character? Let's talk about the whole Biden family. But again, I'm not allowed on that panel.
What is the strategy that the president has going into this? Any tips you'd have?
They've built that in where they're going to turn off those mics so that somebody can't ramble, scream at somebody. Not that my husband would be the one doing that. No. American people deserve a debate because you need to see your choices. You need to see Trump and you need to see the president. And you're going to see how smart he is and the experience he has. And then you'll see somebody who can't put a sentence together. Right. The American people deserve to see the two men who are running for this office because your choice is going to be clear.
When Biden backs out of the debate for whatever reason that they come up with, this clip is really going to come back to haunt them. And I do think that he's still going to back out of that debate because the fact of the matter is putting them side by side will make the choice very clear. And, well, that's the last thing that they want.
Poll after poll that are showing Trump beating your husband outside of the margin of error. How do you turn those numbers around with 5 months out? And are you fearful of what a second Trump term could look like?
Or a third. Those polls are going to turn. I'm confident of it because as time goes on and as people start to focus a little bit more about what's at stake and start to become educated on the issues and the differences between them, I believe that Americans are going to choose good over evil.
This is amazing to me if you really think about what she just said, because they do want this election to be about so-called good versus evil. And by the way, in my heart, I do believe it's good versus evil when you look at what the Democrats are standing for and promoting taking the side of Hamas terrorists and in favor of federal funding of child mutilation. You know, seems pretty evil to me, not to mention federal funding of the murder of unborn babies. But set all of that aside for a moment. The the American people in the polls, according to Joe Biden, just need to be educated on the issues. Think about that for a minute. So the polls are the way they are right now because the American people are too stupid to get it. They're not educated on the issues, and we're going to educate them on the issues. And then they'll see the clear choice between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. Lady, this is the same choice we had 4 years ago. The only new equation in this choice from 4 years ago is that what a presidency under Joe Biden would look like and what it would do to the country was kind of a mystery. People were sort of taking a guess. Well, he can't be that bad. Well, now we know. Now we know exactly how bad it is. The only new information that we have is the hell we've been living through for the last 3.5 years. We just need to educate. Let me tell you something. If their goal was to educate the American voter about the great track record of Joe Biden, then they'd be spending a lot of time talking about the great track record of Joe Biden, but they don't. They don't. All they do, and all she does in this interview, as you'll see in the remaining clips, all she does is try to scare you about what Donald Trump's going to do. That's not about educating the voter about the issues. It's about fear mongering. That's all they've got.
And we've heard Trump bragging about stripping women's reproductive rights. 14 states have a total ban.
I'm sorry. I'm trying not to interrupt all these clips, but I do have to just jump in this one. Donald Trump doesn't brag about stripping women of their reproductive rights. Okay, first of all, what he brags about is actually following through on a promise that Republican presidents have been making for decades, and that is to get Supreme Court justices who will overturn Roe v. Wade. And he did it. He's the only one who's done it, even though I've been hearing promises from Republican presidents for years, decades, in fact. Like it or not, Donald Trump's the one who did it. That's not bragging about stripping women of their reproductive rights. It's bragging about fulfilling your promise to put this decision back in the hands of the states instead of this warped decision that was made at the Supreme Court level instead of letting the people decide something so fundamental and important. And one other quick correction, if I could. If you've got liberal friends on your Facebook page or in social media or in the cubicle next to you at work or, God forbid, at your Thanksgiving Day dinner table, and they use this, it's my favorite euphemism of them all for abortion, for killing a baby. If they use the women's reproductive rights euphemism, would you please just hold up your hand for a second and say, listen, I'm more than interested in having a conversation with you about abortion and the killing of unborn babies. Let's have that conversation. But the euphemisms have to go away here because this has nothing to do with reproductive rights. You see, by the time a woman walks in to a Planned Parenthood abortion mill, she's already reproduced. Okay, the reproductive act has already happened. Abortion has nothing to do with the right to reproduce. Every single woman who has an abortion and the men who aid them and are complicit in it, because I don't want to just make this about women, every single person involved in an abortion has already participated in the reproductive act. Reproduction is done. It's in the rearview mirror. What you're doing is ending the product of that reproduction. Okay? So stop with the euphemism. It's insulting to our intelligence. And if I may, anti-science.
How dangerous a time is this for women, and how much worse could it get in a second or third, as you mentioned, Trump presidency?
Well, it could get a lot worse under a Trump presidency. I mean, you have to believe him when he uses words like dictator, bloodbath, third term, violence. Don't think this isn't going to happen. But we cannot take things for granted because they can. And think of the Supreme Court. Can you imagine if we put any more Republicans on the Supreme Court? We will lose all of our rights. We will lose our rights and freedom. Voting rights. Yes.
So just again, because this is all about educating the voter, there was nothing educational about that. That was fear-mongering and scare tactics. But I would like to participate in some education for you. The Supreme Court cannot take away any of your rights, nor can the Supreme Court grant you any rights. You were born with your rights, and the Constitution protects the government from infringing on those rights. Now, what was decided in Roe v. Wade was not the granting of the right to have an abortion. It was the interpretation of something that's not even in the Constitution, the right to privacy, and extending that to a woman's right to kill her unborn child. And that has been corrected now with the Dobbs decision, because I would remind all of the liberals on the panel, especially this one right here, Whoopi Goldberg, that there was a time when the Supreme Court codified the right to own another human being as a slave. Was that the Supreme Court granting people a right? No. That was the Supreme Court making a horrific decision that had to be undone. And it was undone by the 13th Amendment and the 14th Amendment after the Civil War. That's what it takes. So this has nothing to do with rights. It has to do with bad Supreme Court justices making bad law. There, see? Isn't it fun to educate voters? I mean, they're not doing any of that, but I'm glad we are.
Joe is going to fight for climate change. Joe supports education. Joe supports health care. Those are the things I think that the youth care about.
Loan forgiveness.
Yes, thank you. Student loan forgiveness.
This was a great moment when Sunny Hostin, the NBC News host on this show, actually had to remind Jill Biden about her own talking points that she forgot. The question, of course, had to do with the youth vote. Why are young people not on board? And she said, well, he's for climate. This is, by the way, just the most outraging. Right? What's the word? Because outrageous makes it sound like it's funny. But this outrages me. When the American people are broken into little categories based on either their age or their body parts or their skin color. And Democrats do this all the time. Sadly, some Republicans fall into the trap too. People at a certain age, they are not supporting you. Why is it? And then they just tick off like a laundry list. Well, climate change and student loan debts and this and that. And we're on board with that. So why aren't you voting for me? Well, maybe because we think you're a corrupt liar. And maybe, just maybe, based on my age, that doesn't mean that that's something that really matters to me, because I've been hearing about it forever and nobody does anything about it. But Sunny Hostin having to remind her that he has defied a Supreme Court decision and gone ahead and put through this fakakta student loan repayment, which is unconstitutional, illegal, and unfair to anyone who either didn't go to college or figured out a way to pay for college without going into debt, or figured out a way to pay off their loans because they were a good, upstanding, responsible citizen who makes good on their debts. They're bragging about that. Well, we're doing this for young people. No, actually, you're not doing it for young people. You're relieving student loan debt for millennials who got advanced degrees and now can't get jobs, and they're basically serving people lattes with a PhD in anthropology. That's who you did it for.
The things that he's working for, and working against, we don't have automatic rifles so that, our kids are safe.
Automatic rifles. So our kids are safe. People don't get automatic rifles right now. They get semi-automatic rifles. They don't have automatic rifles. They're not allowed. She's just a moron. So are the people on the panel at The View, and so are the people in the audience. But you're not. That's why we have fun mocking them for how stupid they are and dangerous. One last clip. Speaking of dangerous, stupid morons.
The economy is doing well. Stock market is up. Unemployment is the lowest since the 60s, under 4%. People are working.
It was actually lower under Donald Trump. The stock market soaring, by the way. Last time I checked, Democrats don't care about Wall Street and big business and those evil corporations, right? But I do love it when it becomes a talking point for them. Everything she's saying right now is a lie. But the best part is these are actual bullet point talking items that the campaign puts out, and she's just reading them because she's a journalist.
And yet people are still worried about inflation. Talk about that for a second, about what it means. What can Joe do about inflation?
Well, inflation is down, but recently he's been meeting with CEOs, Target and Walmart and grocery stores. You have to bring down these prices. You probably heard last week, McDonald's said, we're going to bring the prices down on the meals. Burger King that said, okay, we're going to do it too. Corporate greed. We have to get control of it.
Boy, that's going to help Wall Street by blaming corporations and corporate greed for inflation. Do you believe that? Do they believe that? that the inflation problem is really just corporate greed. It's just corporations trying to make more money. So they've raised prices artificially. Do you really think that's what it is? I think they actually do believe that. And I think you know better. All right, well, there you go. I mean, this is a great example of really how desperate they are right now and how they've got nothing. And if this is what the campaign is going to be about, good Lord, it's the fact that they have to trot her out. She was there selling her children's book, by the way, about the White House cat. Not a whole lot of talk about the cat in that segment. She's there fielding questions as if she's the president. Why don't they bring Joe on to answer all those questions? Do you think Joe would have performed the same way at that table if they brought him on to ask those questions? I mean, why not? He's the same age as Joy. That's the view for you. ABC News should be so proud. So proud. Jerry Seinfeld has had quite a year. We started talking about him about 7 or 8 months ago when he was reflecting on how nauseating woke comedians have gotten and woke journalists and left-wing propagandists trying to inflict their speech codes and morality or lack thereof on comedians who are just trying to get a laugh. Then October 7th happens, and Jerry Seinfeld, recognizing evil for what it was, it came out in full-throated support of the state of Israel, flew to Israel and visited there several times. And this has had a serious impact on his life. We reflected on the speech that he gave at the commencement for Duke University and how impactful that was. And we see a different Jerry Seinfeld, at least the public Jerry Seinfeld now, has certainly metamorphized in front of our eyes. So here he is sitting down for a long form interview with Barry Weiss over at the Free Press. And there's portions of this that I really want to share with you because it's pretty powerful, actually.
You made Seinfeld during a period that I think will be remembered as like the golden age of American Jewish life. And
because anti-Semitism was a relic, seemingly a relic.
Yeah.
History books.
I think people felt like history had ended and the American Jewish experience was fundamentally singular and different from any other diaspora experience.
Right, of course.
And, well, I wonder, A, if you thought about the Jewishness of the show.
Never.
Okay. And do you think about it differently now? Now that period's over?
Yeah, well,
or ended.
When first time I went to Israel after I had finished the show and I saw the way they reacted to me and I realized this is not just normal interaction of celebrity public interface. This is different.
How?
I meant something, which I never knew. And it gave me a wonderful feeling like, oh, I didn't realize what I was doing had another value that I didn't know about. And I, of course, loved it.
You have always seemed just apolitical, I guess is the word, like above the fray.
Okay.
And, you know, that everything feels politicized right now.
Yeah.
And so you yourself have become politicized in a way.
A little bit, yeah.
Do you feel that?
I do.
You comfortable with it?
It's so dumb. It's so dumb. In fact, when we get protesters occasionally, I love to say to the audience, you know, I love that these young people, they're trying to get engaged with politics. We have to just correct their aim a little bit. You know, they don't seem to understand that as comedians, we really don't control anything.
Right,
you know?
right.
No one's really...
no, you're pulling the strings over the war in Gaza.
Yeah.
Right? That's how I think of you.
Yeah.
You've done a bunch of shows, obviously. You're constantly doing shows. You did one in Syracuse in December that attracted protesters. And then they were chanting that you're complicit in genocide. Then when I gave this talk in February at the Y, there was this footage of you where they were calling you a genocide supporter and Nazi scum. And the thing that jumped out at me was not the things they were saying, of course, because they say it to anyone.
Yeah.
It's that you were smiling and waving and genuinely seemed to be enjoying yourself.
Yeah.
Were you?
Yeah.
Why?
It's so silly. It's like, you know, they wanna express this, you know, sincere, intense rage. But again, a little off target.
Right. Right.
Little off target. So that's, to me, comedic,
Mm.
you know.
You were in Israel
Yes.
since the war started. How was that trip?
The most powerful experience of my life.
Really?
I'm sure. Yeah.
Why?
You know, you just.
Are you thinking of someone in particular?
Sorry.
So, good stuff, right? And good for Barry Weiss. Honestly, everything she's doing at the Free Press is great. And now these long form interviews that she's doing, she's not just breaking news like she did with the NPR story and the guy who sort of blew the whistle on what was going on at NPR, but she's also sort of moving the needle in terms of the larger cultural conversation we're having. So I really applaud her for the effort that she's putting in and the results that she's garnering. This and listen, I'm not Jewish, okay? Although, so here's the thing about being Jewish. You can be a religious Jew, or you can be an ethnic Jew, or you can be both, because being Jewish is an ethnicity and it's also a religion. And actually, ethnically, I'm 25% Jewish. My maternal grandfather was Jewish, but then he married a Catholic woman. And my mother was raised Catholic, and the children were raised Catholic. So ethnically, let me put it this way. The Nazis would have probably put me on the train because of my blood, even if I didn't practice the faith. So depending on how you look at being Jewish, I say this because I feel like in my life experience and also in my work experience, being in the entertainment industry, I feel like I've had pretty good exposure to all shapes and flavors of Jewish people. And the way this segment started, I think, was really instructive in terms of the American Jewish experience. There are people Jewish people in America who are culturally Jewish, but aren't really rooted in the faith as much as. And by the way, I'm echoing what's been told to me and what I've observed. But there's like this cultural Jewishness where you grow up in a Jewish neighborhood with a Jewish family and with Jewish friends, and you even get bar mitzvahed or bat mitzvahed. But it's really about being Jewish instead of actually adhering to the faith, right? You're Jewish. It's not like you keep kosher. It's not like you go to temple on a weekly basis or synagogue and all of that stuff, right? And then there are people who are incredibly observant Jewish people, and so there's this whole spectrum, and it's not different from Christians in this country as well. But the beginning of this framing here started with, you did Seinfeld, which, if you look at it in retrospect, as Barry Weiss pointed out, it's layered with American secular Jewish comedy, with American secular Jewish references. And it's a very Jewish sounding show. It feels Jewish. It's got a lot of references. And Jerry talks about his Jewish parents and all that stuff. And there's an episode where Elaine is the shiksa, that can draw men away from the faith because she's got the magic powers. Remember that one? And of course, Larry David, who took that whole genre up to another level on Curb Your Enthusiasm. It's this thing. It's part of American comedy of the last 100 years. And so I found it so revealing when she said, did you ever think about it at the time? And he goes, no, I didn't think I was doing a Jewish show. But when you look back on it now, given where we've come and given how everyone has been compartmentalized and forced to take on certain identities and put in certain categories and on certain shelves and boxed into certain quarters, if you look at it, yeah, that's what it is. But at the time, it was just funny, super funny, and popular, the number one show year after year after year after year, as well as in syndication. So what's happened? And you go on this incredible arc over that 4-minute clip that we just showed you where Jerry Seinfeld, who never intended to present any sort of culturally significant Jewish story to America and to the world, but was just focused on being funny and using his life experience to observe everything that was funny in our society, from losing a sock in your laundry to not being able to find your car in a parking lot to having a contest about how well you can maintain your self-control with regard to onanism. Look it up. And now he's reduced to tears after October 7th, after all the protests, after all the misguided energy where he's being called complicit in genocidal massacres. And his visit to Israel is the most powerful experience in his life that brings him to tears just thinking about it. And it's an incredible emotional and thoughtful intellectual exercise, what we just saw, from a guy who's really sort of come into his own at 70 years old to sort of recognize where we are in this country. And he sort of acknowledges that, yeah, at this point, he's become a political figure. And I think he's on the right side of the politics as far as we're concerned. And it's good to see. It's really good to see. Joe Biden is on the wrong side of everything right now, especially the polls, as he tries to cling on to the presidency. And so he's decided, or at least the people who make decisions for him and his campaign have decided, that he's really got to shore up the black vote. He's got to get out there and make sure that black voters come out in droves for him like they did 4 years ago. So, of course, he decided to go to a black place with black people and talk about black things because, well, that's what racist Democrats do when they're trying to take advantage and take for granted the black vote. So he goes to Philadelphia and they set up a photo op. I'm sure you've seen these pictures of what the gymnasium really looked like. There were probably about 100 people there, but they put them all behind him holding signs. In front of him were the media cameras and about 20 people. And he's at a podium addressing the media cameras and 20 people as if he's addressing this giant room full of people. But it wasn't. And then he reveals exactly what went into the decision-making process to choose Kamala Harris as the vice president.
To me, the values of diversity, equality, inclusion are literally, and that's not kidding, the core strengths of America. That's why I'm proud to have the most diverse administration in history that taps into the full talents of our country and starts at the top with the vice president.
Oh boy, where to start with this one? First of all, I think it would be absolutely rude, offensive, and insulting to refer to Kamala Harris as a DEI hire, as a diversity hire, right? That would be rude, except for the fact that he just did it. So I guess if the guy who hired her is acknowledging that she was a DEI hire, it's okay for us to do it too. I can't wait for Joy Reid to get a hold of this one. Let's break this down moment by moment. It's only 19 seconds long, but I got plenty to say about it, as usual.
To me, the values of diversity, equality, inclusion.
So you saw what he did there, right? He misread the teleprompter, which is like, the size of a jumbotron at a football stadium. I assure you it did not say diversity, equality, and inclusion, because we're all in favor of equality. Who doesn't want equality? Of course, equality. No. It's equity, Joe. It's equity. You misread the word. He doesn't even know what he's talking about. He literally doesn't know what he's saying. If somebody sat him down and explained the difference between equality and equity to him, he'd be like, oh, well, we're not doing that equity thing. That's un-American. That's not fair. No, Joe, we're promoting the equity thing. Equality is in the past. Now it's equity. What? That's wrong. We can't do that. Equity, that sounds like socialism. That's Marxism. Yes, that's right, Joe. That's right. We're Marxists now. It's okay. Just read the teleprompter.
Equality, inclusion are literally, and that's not kidding, the core strengths of America.
Literally not kidding, the core strengths of America. Now, I've told you this before. Every time he says not kidding, it means he either doesn't know what he's talking about or he's lying. Sometimes he says it as just a mental tick to catch his breath because the teleprompter's moving too fast for him. After all, he's Joy Behar's age. Diversity, equity, and inclusion are literally, I'm not kidding, the core strengths of America. Now, I guess you could make that case, but if you're thinking about the core strengths of America, you would go back to the founding of our nation. And I hate to tell him this, but diversity back then meant that you'd let a couple of Catholics into the room. I love our country, but not because it's diverse. Diversity is a great thing, but it's not one of the core fundamental strengths of our nation at its founding, and certainly not throughout its history. We weren't very diverse. That's okay, though, because back then we were bonded around certain things that were way more important than the triviality of your DNA or your skin color. We bonded around ideas, thoughts, beliefs, principles, values. First and foremost, that every one of us was born free by God. Now, because of slavery, we didn't get it quite right. It took years to really hold true to those values. But diversity, equity, and inclusion were not the fundamental core principles and foundational ideas that made this country great. And they still aren't. They're great side benefits of the principles of freedom, the principles of liberty, the principles that God granted us these rights, not a government. And the government should serve the people, not the other way around. That's what our nation was founded on. And because anyone of every color or every religion or any ethnicity can embrace those four core fundamental principles, then that's when the diversity happened in our country, because people from all around the world recognized that we had something different going on here, that we didn't identify ourselves based on where we happened to be born or who we happened to be born to or the color of our skin or our accent or our language or even our bank account. We valued each other based on the God-given rights that we were created with. So then suddenly people flock from all around the world and say, yeah, get me some of that. Then suddenly you see diversity of skin color and faith and ethnicity, but that's not the core fundamental building block of our country as he just maintained. Wouldn't it be great to see a president stand in front of the American people and ascribe freedom and liberty and self-determination and free market principles as, I'm sorry, what did he say again?
And that's not kidding. The core strengths of America.
Wouldn't it be great to have him say that those were the core strengths of America? Law and order, equal justice under the law, one man, one vote. These are the principles that are the core foundational strengths of our nation. All right. But no, to Joe Biden, suddenly, if this was really, again, I just want to get the words right.
It's not kidding. The core strengths of America.
If diversity, equity, and inclusion are the core strengths of America, then they would have been the core strengths of America 30 years ago or 50 years ago. Would Senator Joe Biden in 1972 have said that diversity, equity, and inclusion are the core strengths of America? You know, the Joe Biden who was opposing busing because he didn't want his kids to go to a racial jungle at their school? Do you think well, how about 30 years ago when Senator Joe Biden was lying his way through a presidential campaign and pretending that he was giving speeches that were really written by people over in England? Do you think he would have said that? I mean, if it's really a core foundational principle of our nation, then it's not something that just came up with, 6 years ago. But in fact, DEI is something that they came up with 6 years ago. But now, my friends, it's a core fundamental building block of our nation.
That's why I'm proud to have the most diverse administration in history. It taps into the full talents of our country. It starts at the top with the vice president.
Who's going to tell him that the vice president is not actually at the top? Is someone going to actually break the news to Joe Biden that technically he's the one at the top? Why does he keep doing this? But there you go. I am proud that I picked Kamala Harris because of DEI and how important it is to me all of a sudden. I'm proud that I picked Kamala Harris. So that's why he picked her. I mean, we've always known that, but now he's admitted it. And so now there's nothing wrong with us. You're referring to Kamala Harris as exactly what she is, a diversity hire. She is a DEI hire. Joe Biden just proudly proclaimed it. Also in front of this black audience in a black city talking about black things because he wants the black vote because, you know, he's racist. He made this very important boast.
On Memorial Day, I proudly stood with a black man.
Well, it's about time. I mean, he's been around for over 80 years. And it took him until this Memorial Day to stand with a black man. I think he's talking about Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin. I don't know. I mean, Lloyd Austin has served our country as a 4-star general. I think he's got some good things in his track record before he became Secretary of Defense. A couple of things are sketchy, but I will say this about him. He's a West Point grad. He served our nation for decades. And as a 4-star general, I think that he would probably not want his entire existence and career of service in our military to be boiled down to he's a black man. But in his boss's eyes and the commander-in-chief's eyes, that's pretty much it. Who's that guy over there? He's a black man.
On Memorial Day, I proudly stood with a black man.
I'm glad he was proud of it. I mean, you got to give him that. At least he's proud of standing with a black man. I mean, there was a time when he wouldn't have been so proud. What's really at stake here, though, is Joe Biden trying to get the, as we called it, as Democrats often call it, the black vote. And so probably rather than just pandering to them and putting on this photo op that is all camera tricks instead of the reality of an empty gymnasium, instead of bragging about DEI, which he doesn't actually understand because he said equality, and the fact that Kamala Harris was a diversity hire, instead of bragging about the fact that on Memorial Day he lowered himself to stand next to a black man, maybe he should actually look at what voters are concerned about. Maybe he should actually study the polls and figure out exactly what the problem is right now on why he's losing support. CNN did the hard work for him on that one.
Bring major change to the U.S. Look at this. 65% of voters under the age of 30 say they want a candidate to bring major change to the U.S. And in that same poll, you know which candidate they thought would bring major change to the country? They thought Donald Trump would. So all of a sudden you match up those two questions and you get a pretty clear understanding of why younger voters seem to be becoming more Republican versus 4 years ago.
You got to read this. And by the way, that's also for younger voters of color as well. He's hemorrhaging those votes. Now, MSNBC recognizes how dangerous this is for their chances of having Joe Biden get reelected. So to lecture those young black voters and to tell them what they should do, they trotted out this guy who appears to be, other than Joe Biden, the whitest man in America. There's nothing better than the whitest man in America on MSNBC lecturing black voters about what's best for them.
It is not the concern about African-American voters, young voters, and Hispanic voters, like these core elements of the Democratic coalition. The concern is not that anybody really thinks they're going to go flock off to Donald Trump. The concern is that they stay home, that in a very, very close election in all of those battleground states, you know, if a large chunk of any of those parts of the coalition decide to just say, screw it, I'm not going to vote, that's a problem for the Biden campaign. The upside there, to your point, Joe, is you're not trying to persuade them in a lot of cases to come back to Joe Biden. You're just trying to persuade them to do what they did in 2020 and to realize the stakes and what a devastating outcome it would be for their interests, for the interests of young voters, that pocketbook interests. They are focused more on the economy than they are on Gaza. We see that in the polling for African American and Latino voters that a Trump presidency, Trump reelection would be terrible for them. So just please do what you did from the Biden campaign's point of view. Just do what you did back in 2020. You're right. That is the easier sell than trying to get older white voters who have drifted away from the Democratic coalition over the last 20 years to come back home. Those guys are sticking with Biden, and that's a big part of why they can be optimistic in those 3 Midwestern states.
So, in other words, all you black voters, you young voters, come back and do what's good for you. We know what's best. This whole thing about staying home or flirting with voting for Donald Trump, you morons, you're operating against your own best interests. Look at how great things are for you right now. Look at what voting for Democrats in 2020 did for you. And if you can't see it, you're the problem, you morons. So listen to Boss Whitey over here and come back and vote for who we tell you to vote for. Is this going to work? That's all they got? That's actually all they got. I said it yesterday. Donald Trump actually has a golden opportunity right now to actually present himself as sort of the optimistic, forward-thinking visionary in this campaign. He can actually offer voters something to vote for, not something to be terrified about and vote against. That's all Democrats have. And identity politics. You know, the other guys are racists. I'm going to hire more black people to work in my White House, and certainly that's going to affect your life, so vote for me. How insulting is that message? Hey, I made a black woman vice president. What more do you want? Oh, I know you can't afford your car payments or milk or eggs or gas, and your kids are getting a lousy education. But look, I brought in this one black woman here. Why aren't you grateful? The whole DEI thing and the whole Heidelman there on MSNBC saying, do what's good for you. Don't operate against your own best interest. All that rhetoric works when your economy isn't in the toilet. All that rhetoric works when you're not letting 10 million people illegally cross into the country and screw up the basic fundamental social structures of major American cities where the majority of those black voters actually live. They're seeing illegal immigrants that Biden has led into the country get benefits that they've never gotten from Democrats, ever. And they're supposed to shut their mouth and just dutifully vote a certain way because white boy on MSNBC tells them to? Sorry, Boss Whitey. I should stick with my original description. Yeah, that's all they got. Here comes Trump, man. Keep doing rallies in the Bronx and saying, we got a brighter future ahead of us. Give me a shot. Suddenly he's morning in America. And the Democrats, Joe Biden, the angry cranks on MSNBC and CNN, they're opening the doors wide open for him to take that lane. I hope he's smart enough to take it. We have been spending a lot of time talking about the journey that Bill Maher's been on. And yes, he's selling a book, so he's going to say what he needs to say in whatever venue to sell that book. That's fine. We're cynical. We recognize that. It is what it is. But he's definitely amped up his criticism of the left. And he's made some observations that his pals, either on the panel with him or interviewing him or in his audience, are uncomfortable with, because he has a way of cutting through the crap and actually calling the left on their hypocrisy and bull. So when he sat with Fareed Zakaria at CNN, there were quite a few revelations. And I'm only going to pause it a couple of times here because ultimately, at the end of the day, I sniff out Bill Maher's absolute and complete total bullshit that he's about to lay out for you. So let's go on this journey together, watch what he has to say, and then I'll call him on it as soon as he exposes it.
In the middle of your book, you write, some people think I've changed. I assure you I have not. I'm still the same unmarried, childless, pot-smoking libertine I always was. I have many flaws, but you can't accuse me of maturing.
Now, that sounds like a really funny, good book.
So I want to put to you, because I know you like listening to disagreement, people who say to me, and there are many who say, I love Bill Maher, but he has matured too much. He's become cranky. He's become crotchety. He's become one of those old guys who says, the kids are crazy. It was better in my day. What do you say to them?
They're wrong. I mean, they're wrong, and the kids are crazy. It's interesting. They have this idea, the younger generation, maybe every generation does, that just because something is new makes it better. And that's not true. New is not synonymous with better.
But you're sounding like an old-fashioned conservative.
Okay. I heard a couple of people say, or maybe they wrote it online, that, well, I'm a hypocrite because you were for the demonstrators in 1968 or whatever it was when they were demonstrating against the Vietnam War. Yeah, that was very different. First of all, the students weren't against their own. These students were threatening other students. That didn't happen in the Vietnam War. And being against the Vietnam War made sense. It was a war that we probably should not have been in.
But let me ask you,
this is demonstrating and protesting for a terrorist group. I mean, Hamas is.
Well, to be fair, a lot of students aren't doing that. There are a lot of outside, people have mixed together what students are doing, what outside protesters are doing. But let me ask you a broader question, which is, a lot of people will say, look, this is how you get change. It's noisy. Some people say the wrong thing. Some people go too far. But the whole tradition of this kind of expansion of rights, it's messy, it's chaotic. There's probably a bunch of excess, as there probably was in the 60s. There was the Black Panthers and the Weathermen and things like that. But they think of you as somebody who was, you were okay with all that, but you've turned.
I haven't turned. Yes, people have said to me, you make fun of the left more than you used to. And guilty, I have, because the left has changed. Now, the right has changed also, and even worse. I mean, the right doesn't believe in democracy anymore. I mean, they've thrown their lot in with this sociopath named Donald Trump, who only thinks elections count when we win. Okay, well, that's worse. But it's not like the left hasn't changed also. So I'm going to call it out wherever I see it. I mean, there are things that have to do with, gender and race and free speech and just ideas about, you can be healthy at any weight, and gender is always a social construct, and maybe we should give communism another try, and maybe we should get rid of capitalism and the border patrol, and let's tear down statues of Lincoln and get rid of the police. Just, no. It's not that I've gotten old. It's that your ideas are stupid.
So this is a good place to pause. There's a little bit more to this, but this equivocation, the right is worse. They're a lot worse because, as he puts it, they don't believe in democracy anymore. They've thrown down with Trump and their election deniers. So I'm so sick of this talking point. This whole idea of not believing in democracy, first of all, again, it has to be said, we are not a democracy. We're a constitutional republic, although we do use the democratic process to choose our representatives in this constitutional republic. And we do believe in the democratic process. In fact, we believe so much in democracy and using democracy to select our representatives that we want to make sure that that democratic process is free of corruption. See, we're the ones who do believe in democracy. That means one man, one vote. That means that only eligible people should be able to vote. It means that ballots should be examined to ensure that they are legal before they get counted. It means that ballots should be kept in a secure place and only authorized personnel should be able to utilize them. In fact, we believe in democracy so much, Bill, that we think we should adopt the kind of systems that foreign countries, even third world countries that we have had to impose democratic processes on, employ. Like voter ID. In every single modern country that utilizes democracy, you've got to prove you're an eligible voter and you are who you say you are before you get a ballot. When we imposed democracy on places like Iraq and Afghanistan, did we just say, now anyone can vote, it doesn't matter, and ballots can come in even after election day and they don't have to be signed and they don't have to be dated, and we'll go ahead and count them anyway? No, we didn't do that. What did we do in Afghanistan when we imposed democracy on them? We made them dip their fingers in purple ink when they voted to make sure that it was secure and valid. So don't freaking stand up there and tell me we don't believe in democracy. It's the people who are corrupting our voting process that don't believe in democracy, who are complicit and look the other way with all of the shenanigans that go on. We believe in democracy. We just believe that the democratic process should be done in such a way where at the end of the day, on election night, when all the ballots are counted on one day, on election day, not for 3 weeks afterwards, that on election day, everyone, win or lose, can walk away saying, well, we didn't win, but at least it was a fair election. And frankly, in this country, we haven't had that for over 20 years. It's only this last time that it was Republicans who questioned the validity of the election. So I hate that talking point, and I'm sick of it, and I'm tired of it. And of course, Fareed Zakaria was not equipped to push back on it. That said, even if you stipulate that this thing that he thinks is really worse, the conservatives and the right in this country don't believe in democracy anymore because they've thrown down with Trump. Look at the laundry list of things that he just said that he disagrees with the left on. From radical gender ideology to eliminating police officers, to throwing down with terrorists in Israel, to God, what was that? Oh, and bringing back communism and Marxism to our society, because that's a good. I mean, I'm sorry, if you're really weighing the two, one of them is specific to the last election that rewrote the rule book with regard to mail-in ballots and drop boxes, all under the fake premise of the pandemic. The other one fundamentally upends not just what this country stands for, but what basic biology means. I know which one I think is worse, Bill. But then he goes on to wax poetic about the good old days when people in America could disagree without hating each other. And I know we all want to believe this. We all want to love this idea that we can fight tooth and nail. And like Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill, he's going to reference this. They just had a cocktail together. By the way, I think that only happened once during the entire 8 years that Reagan was president. But give it to them for a minute. Let's say things were more civilized back then. I want you to listen. Take what he just said about conservatives, that we don't believe in democracy and we've thrown down with an authoritarian dictator who wants to never leave office if he gets in. That's who he thinks you are. And he'll go on further. And then ask yourself as you hear this, whether you really think Bill Maher doesn't hate conservatives. He claims he doesn't want us all to hate each other. And then listen to the hate.
Okay.
Common sense is still common sense.
Yes, common sense is common sense. And I'm going to call it out wherever it is on the spectrum.
So, Bill, you've talked a lot about how the left has gone crazy. But to be fair to you, you've always also pointed out the right has gone even crazier, embracing Trump. I want to ask you why you think it happened. Because, you know, this was the party of Ronald Reagan. Free markets, free trade, loved immigration, very optimistic. What do you think made it, you know, it's now dour, pessimistic. America is it's American carnage.
Well, I think the basis of it is we started to hate each other. I mean, you mentioned Ronald Reagan. Famously, he used to have a drink at the end of the day, often with Tip O'Neill, who was the leader in the House and the Democrat. But they were just two Irish Pauls who could get together and have a scotch at the end of the day. And they knew they weren't going to get along on many issues, but they didn't hate each other. They could drink together. That is inconceivable today. Can you imagine Joe Biden having a drink with Mike Johnson? It just would never happen. When you hate people, you don't listen to them. So it doesn't matter how reasonable they might be. We have reached this place where each side thinks the other side is an existential threat. You hear that term from both sides all the time. That is just a terrible place to be, because we find ourselves in this situation where both sides are literally siding with enemies of America rather than the opposition party within the country. I mean, you see Republican MAGA people with T-shirts that say, I'd rather be with Russia than Democrats. Trump stood with Putin against our intelligence agencies. Fox News literally uses Russian talking points. Tucker Carlson went over there and did the whole dog and pony show backing up Putin, basically. And on the left, you see them marching for Hamas, a terrorist organization. This is a terrible place to be, and it can happen here. The last chapter in the book is called Civil War, and you hear more about it all the time. People who are actually pining for it. Civil War, come on, let's do this thing. Let's get this going. Let's have this national divorce. It can't work. It won't work. Half the country is not going to self-deport, even if you win every election. I don't know. Sometimes you have to hit bottom before you can go back to the top. I don't know what that means in this country. But I know one thing, Donald Trump is not going to concede the election. So what happens in January 2025 on the 20th when Inauguration Day rolls around and he didn't win the election? He's not just going to go away. And if he wins and he's the president in January 20th, 2025, he's never going to give that up. Because he doesn't understand the Constitution, he doesn't care about it. I don't think he's ever read it. He just knows power and winning, and our side is right.
Where do you get more hate mail from, the left or right?
I don't know, because I don't read it.
On that note,
I don't care.
Well, and because he doesn't care, I feel just fine saying what I'm going to say, because that was a complete, total pile of bullshit from Bill Maher. Think about what he just said. Think about how he just painted conservatives and Trump voters, Trump supporters, and Donald Trump himself. According to Bill Maher, we don't believe in democracy anymore. We've thrown down with a dictator. We support Vladimir Putin and Russia and would rather be Russian than American. We take talking points from Russian propagandists and push Russian disinformation. And Donald Trump, if he loses the election, he won't concede the defeat and will attempt to take over the White House and the presidency. And if he does win the election, he will never leave and become president for life and a dictator who will hang on to power because that's all he knows. And we all support him and will be fine with him staying in office and staying there as our dictator for life. And I got to ask Bill Maher, if that's what you really believe Trump supporters and conservatives are, why don't you hate them? I mean, I would hate them. If you really think Trump is a Hitler, then you really think the people who support Hitler are Nazis. And do you not hate Nazis, dude? Go wax poetic here and sing Morning in America by pining for the good old days when Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill could have a scotch at the end of the day, and then paint Trump supporters the way you just painted them. Of course you hate us. It's obvious you hate us. But you're pretending you don't because you want to sell books and act like you're the grown-up in the room. Dude, you're full of shit. Thankfully, though, you don't listen to the critics, so you'll never see this, and it's all good. That's it for this time. Until next time, I'm Larry O'Connor. Please call me Larry.